Hello everybody, this is the Wellfair on tnsradio.ning.com. I'm the Wellfair and I've got my Wellfair Allstars team with me this afternoon. We're going to be talking about various topics. We're going to look quite in depth at ATOS, and Nick and Neon Machine have had their own personal experiences with ATOS. So we're going to have a sort of general discussion amongst ourselves about various different topics that have been coming up this week. And then we're going to go on to that. So I hope everyone carries on listening to this. I don't know, how would I describe this week? It's been interesting, it's been busy, we've had loads to do, the website's up and running. If you want to contact us, you can contact us through our website, which is www.wellfair, as in wellfair.org.uk, or you can email us on team@wellfair.org.uk. That's welfare, WELLFAIR. We're getting email contacts finally, because everything's set up. Everyone's worked so hard. Actually, I want to say a big thank you to everybody that's come on board. I just feel we've got the best team. It's like if I could have cherry-picked the team that I would have, wanted to work with, I wouldn't have chosen any differently. I just feel so happy and so comfortable with the people that I'm working with, and they're all so talented in their own way. So, a big thank you to all of you. You all know who you are. Okay, so this week and the stuff that's come up this week. Nick and Neon Machine have been, as you know, working with me, so it's sort of us three as Wellfair Allstars. We've got our welfare rights group on Skype, and that's been fairly busy. This week we've been pretty much dealing with sort of ATOS inquiries, tax credit stuff, compliance. And the beauty of having a team like this is if I get a question, even if I know the answer, even if it's a scenario that I know, it's just so good to be able to bounce ideas off not just one person, but two, because you get different input from both of them. So I've got three different outlooks, which is absolutely fantastic. Right. Sorry, I've got no notes, so I'm trying to do this from my head. Right, so the stuff we were talking about were, in particular, I want to talk about ATOS, really. I want to start with ATOS as it's been quite a big thing. Nick, I know that, Neo, I think it's been you that's responded to, we've had an email from somebody. I don't know, who wants to talk about the email?
Oh, well, I'll just quickly say that I responded to this email, and I just made a suggestion.
What was the question?
What the question?
What was the email about?
If I remember correctly, it was an individual who was sent a letter, I think, from ATOS saying that they wanted to see them for an assessment. If I'm correct.
I think.
And but they're in the process also of having some kind of surgery in the next 6 weeks to whenever. Yes?
Yeah, actually, I've got it in front of me. Shall I just read it out?
Sure.
Okay. Can you advise me on my rights regarding an upcoming ATOS assessment when just 5 weeks later I will be in hospital for surgery? I did read somewhere that if you had planned surgery within either 6 weeks or months, then you could not be found fit for work. But I've also read horror stories about these ATOS assessments. So this person is concerned that they've got surgery 5 weeks after the ATOS assessment is due, and wants to know if there's a regulation or something that would show that he doesn't have to go to this assessment if he has surgery planned 5 weeks later.
Well, I personally couldn't find anything written down.
Nothing at all?
Not me personally. Maybe, I don't know if anyone else has found anything, but all I can suggest is, based on my own experience, that even though it's a different situation, it might help. I mean, if this guy has a disability advisor, if he has one, then like what I did is when I had a letter through for an assessment from ATOS, I basically just I just called up my advisor and said, I'm in the middle of an educational program through the disability department, and could you basically halt the process that ATOS is trying to put me through? So it's just a suggestion that the individual could try to see whether or not it could help him. That's all I can really mention at the moment.
It's
so if
unusual.
He does have an advisor, say again.
It's unusual, I think, that something like this. I know you've looked, and we'll talk to Nick in a sec. But I think he has also looked, and there is nothing, nothing that jumps to view very quickly about this. And surely that must be not an unusual thing that somebody's coming up for surgery if they're or having some kind of major operation soon after their assessment. Nick, what did you find out?
I had the same thing as Nia, which really intrigues me, that my first port of call was straight into the DWP's own WCA handbook, which covers all the procedures on the medical. No mention there that I could see. Also, the Decision Maker's Guide, which is one of my favourite places, because that nearly always covers almost every eventuality, and still nothing. I mean, I ended up, just in desperation, I think I've already mentioned to you, there was a fantastic forum site that I joined up purely because they had so much background on ESA, DLA and ATOS medicals. I've posted up there. I've had a very good response back on a couple of alternative ideas I was thinking of around this situation. But even they weren't able to come up with saying, what I really wanted to do is get back to this person and say, this is the section of the guide that you can look at, because I'd always want to be able to back up anything I'm saying by saying that's what the official line is. And I'm very surprised there's not a lot on this. I think the main thing came out of the forum on this is they're saying really it would be good to have more background information. Is this surgery actually going to cure a major problem that's been there a long time? Is it going to end up with more problems for recuperation? What is the actual forecast over the next few weeks and after surgery? So I think we need to look at certain things about what the specific medical thing is and what the surgery may or may not do. Other than that, I had a couple of general ideas about how it might be held up and some interesting stuff coming up with ATOS. But I think, we might want to come back to that in a moment if we're dealing specifically with this case.
Okay. I can't believe neither of you could find anything. If you can't find anything, I won't be able to either, because I know how thorough you both are. I just find it incredible that there is nothing in their guidance or in the actual, the DWP, WCA handbook, nothing referring to somebody who would be having some kind of operation so soon after their assessment.
Only thing I seem to be able to conclude, if I can't find it and no one else can find it, it's obviously not something they're even interested in, and they would just go ahead and do it anyway.
So this basically reinforces what we were thinking and what we know. That there is a snapshot. The working capability assessment is a snapshot for the period that they can see you at that assessment. They don't care what happens to you when you leave that room, do they? Because if they can't be bothered to put something in the regulations or have some kind of, I don't know, something that will allow somebody to not attend an interview under those circumstances, I just can't believe that that's not written in somewhere. I'm just gobsmacked. It just proves what we know.
Only thing I've heard similar is I've seen a couple of things from really in-depth hunting through the internet, And it would seem that, it may be that your circumstances are going to change in the future. We're looking at your medical on that day, and that's what we're going to decide. And if things do change in future, you might be able to reclaim if you satisfy all the rules. But, if it is a couple of weeks away, we'll just start the process again.
What a waste of money, what a waste of people's time, what a way to treat people. Just shocking, absolutely shocking. I know we want to talk, I know you both had your own personal experiences with ATOS, and I want to come on to that separately. So really, I wanted to really go through what has been happening this week and how you two have both found this week and what you guys have been working on too. So, Leon, do you want to go first and tell us about your week and what you've been doing? So I know you've been working with somebody around community care grant stuff. What you found there? I know you had some sort of input into the compliance stuff. So, the compliance case that I was talking about. Do you want to just sort of talk about a bit how you found this week and what you've been working on?
Yeah, today, I was just looking up some information about the CCG, the Community Care Grant, and the individual who has been saying that he's been asked for an interview or something like this. And it's from my experience, it's always been very, it's unlikely that anyone was ever really asked to go to a face-to-face interview. So there was something that they called a pre-award interview, but it didn't seem to be anything that was face-to-face. Usually they, from my memory, is that they really would, they really would just phone you. And I think it was more to do with that they just decide that they just have a lack of evidence of some kind, and they just want to phone you up to ask you a few questions because they can't make a decision based on the information you've given them. But I don't know. I've never ever known anyone having to actually go to an interview for a CCG.
Interesting, isn't it? Isn't it? You've had a completely different experience, haven't you, with community care grants?
Yeah, well, from being in the offices, from what I used to see and listen and ask questions about. Yeah, it was because usually, they fill out a form called an SF300, and that was a CCG grant form. I'm not even sure if they even supply them now. I remember at one time they basically they were all separate colours, and because they wanted to save money, as they like to do, they just made them all white, black and white forms, but just the the usual differentiation of the name, and but whether you can still actually get a form now, I'm not even sure, because you just used to fill it out and then just send it in via the post, or you hand it in, and they would make the decisions more than likely during the day on the form. So obviously depending on how much of a influx of claims they had in the day. But yeah, interviews, no, I don't remember. I don't ever remember it. No.
Nick, what was your experience? As yours was very, very different, wasn't it?
Well, at the time I was actually working DWP way back. I did a lot of work because I was on the front line, actually seeing people coming through the door. We did a lot of work with actually starting the form process. And I've got a feeling there was quite a bit of regional variation at the time. I think a lot of it was a case of they would actually see people and go through the form, and they had, similar to us, like AO grade people of general staff who would actually help with the form completion, check the evidence, take copies, go through it quite thoroughly and make sure people would leave. If it was like a grant or something that would need time to consider, they would send them on their way and say, we will be in touch. But they would almost do a full service at the outset, which I think overall, when it started to shift to the call centre idea that they've got now, as far as I know, for the Southwest, it shifted out to Cornwall. We have a call centre in Dorset. We've got a social fund centre in Cornwall. I think there's other call centres various places, but they've pretty much divided it up. And I think it's now become almost certainly a phone-based or internet-based. I think the chances of seeing forms these days are quite slim, and I think they're really trying to push people to online. You download a PDF and then you fill it out. Quite often they will then call you back to check through and actually go through any evidence you need and try and deal with it that way. There seems to be a lot of disconnect with the job centre on this, and I think it's part of what's been mentioned before. They don't really want people in crisis situations in the job centres, and it's better if they're kept at arm's length by phone or by post. They're not actually having to deal with someone on the spot, and I think the possibility of tension doesn't really come into it.
It's very interesting, actually, because I mean, I don't know about you, Ferry, but I mean, I know obviously, you're in London and that, but I mean, every time I go sign on, this is something that I realised, and well, whenever I go to a job centre, there's hardly anybody in there. It's bizarre. I don't know. Do you experience that? There's hardly anyone in there. I mean, I'm not saying there's always staff, but there only seems to be 1, 2, maybe 3 people in the actual job centre. Who are claimants or claiming JSA or signing on the day. I hardly see anybody. So I kind of think, where are they all?
I think some of that's coming because now I know they do Friday signing, so they're actually signing over 5 days rather than 4. And I mean, I know from taking someone to sign, and they're complaining. They were complaining first of all because they seem to be getting later and later appointments in the afternoon, and I said that probably means they like you and they want to deal with you at the end and have an easy time. But it seems they have a rota that now it's back to first thing in the morning, and they seem to be moving the times around. They seem to be doing a lot to keep people on their toes. The one thing I know in the past, and I don't know, we would need someone inside to confirm it. I know in the past, when you get someone who is a serious problem and a threat to the staff, and because the job centre is all completely open plan, I know there were times in very extreme cases where they would take out an injunction to keep anyone they thought was a threat away, and I wonder if perhaps they're using that quite a bit more.
Yeah, maybe that is it. Yeah, could very well be. I just found that very interesting. Considering I remember the days when before when I signed on years ago, it was always busy. I mean, literally, it was like take a ticket and queue.
Absolutely, I know just before I actually joined, and one of the logics of me actually joining that department was I was stood in a job centre with queues heading out the door, and this was 89, 90. And it seemed like a very logical idea of, well, if I'm working on the other side of the desk, I'm going to be occupied for quite a few years. And if I'm going to become out of a job, if there's not enough work to do, there should be plenty other work around.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good way to get in and think about that, wasn't it? You regret it now?
Not really. It taught me a hell of a lot. I used to be very introverted and had a great deal of problems speaking to people, believe it or not.
Well, everything makes you who you are today, doesn't it? All your experience and, whatever you went through there has obviously made you who you are now, which is a beautiful person, so we're lucky.
You haven't met me yet.
Oh, I have. I know you well enough.
Okay, I'll accept that.
Good.
I think it makes you see certainly another side.
I think you certainly get to see a different side of life from, say, the general public. You get to see a great deal of what's actually happening down at the bottom of society, and that is quite scary.
Yeah. And I remember mentioning that on I think it was the original broadcast that I was on, and just mentioning that when I first started there, how I just felt, it was like I was no longer living in my little bubble anymore. That got burst very quickly. Just don't realise these things exist.
I know, absolutely. I mean, I would assume you might equate to the fact if I was walking down the street and I had someone call my name, it was usually a fear reaction that came in rather than thinking, oh, is that someone I know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't sign near where I used to work. I sign at a different job centre than the one I should be signing at, because it would just be, I'd be meeting all the people that I used to help. So it would just be a fucking nightmare. I would have hated it, and it would just been really, really awkward.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when anybody ever asked me the question, "Where do you work?" I used to try and avoid telling them.
In an office, doing a very boring job was the stock answer, wasn't it?
That's right, something like that.
Yeah.
A job to be proud of. Well, I just think, back to the community care grant, just, obviously, I think now, I mean, I don't know when this person made a claim for a community care grant previously, but when they did, they had to go for an interview and they were turned down. So their worry is that they'll have to go for an interview, be turned down, have to, go to appeal, blah, blah, blah. But maybe it looks like now they're not interviewing people because they haven't got the manpower to do so. And if they do want to, check or, they can call them. And that's the way, that's your experience of administering community care grants, and it's mine. I couldn't believe that they would interview you for a community care grant. I understand that they would call you just to check, because it's for them it would be a substantial amount of money to pay you and not get back as a grant, not a loan.
I looked at, I'm sure, I looked at today, it was either the legislation or it was something, or part of the decision makers guide. I don't remember reading, there was nothing specific about people compulsory interviews for CCGs. I didn't see anything in there that was specific. It was nothing, no black and white, compulsory interview for CCG. It wasn't there. I'm sure it wasn't there. Unless somebody would to verify it, but I didn't see anything.
Well, I've got my handbook and I checked my handbook, and there was nothing in there about compulsory interviews, so I think it must be a regional thing before. I don't think they'll be able to have the manpower to do that anyway. So I think, maybe go for it.
This individual, do they know why they want a CCG? Is it?
For things for the house, so it would be, certain items for their household.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think you should just fill out the form. Obviously state what you need and the rest of it, and fill out the gaps, and send it on, and then I'd be amazed if they ask for an interview again. I'd be amazed. Just go through the process and just keep in touch and let us know how it goes.
Yeah.
Really. That's all you can really do. That's all they can really do at the moment. Just go through the process and then keep in touch. And if anything bizarre happens, like you got to come for an interview, then, well, we'd have to try and sort that out. Because there's nothing there that states you have to go.
Yeah. I'm with you there. Yeah, I agree.
So, so there you go.
I think part of the impression I seem to get now as well is there doesn't seem to be a consistent approach. I think if you're in different parts of the country, there's different practices happening. I did hear something, you mentioned about shortage of staff. Someone is saying apparently they've just had a big recruitment drive and they've had 60,000 applications, which they've now reduced to 10,000 people for interview, but this is on a national level.
Yeah, I know they were recruiting because I got they shoved a post, an EO post for me because they're recruiting locally, and that was, I don't know, February. So that was sort of about the time that you'd be going to interview now, but no, I didn't apply.
The thing is, with the call centre, the staff turnover is high. And people come in and they just leave. They can't stand it. A lot of them just leave within the first month. So they're literally. The kind of money that they must be spending on advertising for jobs and all the paperwork, because people come in, they can't stand it, they leave, and they have to keep advertising to fill the spaces, because the only people that seem to want to stay there are a lot of people who have been there a long time, and they basically got they're on their maximum wages and stuff, and they don't want to lose it or their pensions. That's really the only people that really stick it now. All the newbies that come in, this is what I hear. They just stick it for a small amount of time and they leave.
I think that's absolutely spot on. I know from, I think just at the time I was on my way out, they were starting to actually say that they were having their figures through on staffing was saying the average life of one of the processing staff was 2 years. And when you factor in that there was a large majority of people there, I was in with people who were like 10 years plus, 20 years plus, who were sitting there saying they were keeping their jobs and dealing with it. Everything else, it was almost like they were constantly trying to fill up a bucket with holes in, and no matter how long, I think most of it, they were saying, the new staff were averaging 6 months.
Wow. Yeah, anyone that is there and has been there for a while has got a stake in staying, normally your pension or generally your pension, because it's a good pension because you paid in enough.
They also have, it's taken them, let's say, 10 years or whatever to reach a maximum on their wages, and they still got mortgages to pay, and they I suppose it's fear-based. They don't want to lose a job they're in because they know they're going to end up on the job that's a lot less,
It's something it's something they know, trust. It's it's been there. They've been their employer for X amount of years, most of their probably their adult life. It's all they know, and they're comfortable there. Why not stick it out for a bit, a bit longer and leave and be comfortable?
They are institutionalised. They basically pretty much.
Yeah, and I think the fear comes in as well. You have someone, if they've been in a job 10 years, you don't get that in most other places. These people know they would have to go out into the job market. I mean, I know for a fact of the person I took to the job centre came out and said, "I'm glad I didn't get that woman." And there's a particularly nasty woman, I think, just in terms of she's got a bad attitude, and she described her, and I said, I remember her back in 89, 90, and she was there still. I mean, basically just from the makeup and attitude, and I think that woman has been in the same office doing the same job for all those years, and is still the same person. They are not going to go anywhere in a hurry.
No.
Whoa. Yeah, all those years. Wow, doing the same thing day after day. Wow.
And then you have to go in and sign on and show that you're doing your utmost to seek a job and keep your CV up to date with someone who hasn't participated in the labour market for 20-odd years. It's very hard to hold any sort of empathy with that person to try and say, I'm trying.
Yeah, they haven't got a clue. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember just one quick thing when because I was basically given an application for the DWP job because I was claiming income support at the time, and they basically shoved this in front of me and said, "Apply for this." And I realised what it was, and I thought, "Oh my God!" At the time, because I was really young, I was in my early 20s, and I thought, "Oh no, I don't know. I'm not too sure if I can do this because it's like going from one side to the next, you see, because obviously it's like completely alien. I don't know if I can handle this, right?" And I applied and I went through the whole processes and I got the job. And I thought, oh, I don't know if I can even handle this. And once I got in there, it was kind of like a real sort of, kind of an explosion of, experiences of what the world is kind of like, in certain areas you didn't quite realise. And but like you said, Nick, most people there, they've been there 10 years, 20 years. They had no idea what it was like to be unemployed, no idea what it's like to not have a job. I remember one of the individuals said to me, "Oh, you'd be better off on the front line, Shane, because you're like them out there. You were unemployed, like, And I wasn't too sure how to take that. See, I didn't know whether or not to sort of understand what they were saying or just slap them, because I thought they were taking the piss at one point. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. So that was an interesting moment there. But a lot of them had no idea. No idea. Even decision makers probably more than likely no idea, because I think they're just going completely on that guide. So
I
but
don't.
not quite.
Do they even look at their guide though? How many of the decision makers that you worked with actually looked at their guide, knew what they were talking about?
Well, there was an individual decision maker there. He either knew his job like the back of his hand, just perfectly, and he because I can only come to that conclusion in some way because he used to make decisions in an instant. He was just really quick at making decisions. Whether those decisions were negative or positive, I was never particularly sure. But he was really, really quick. I mean, let's say I gave him 20 CCGs, because I had to input all these things on the system. I had to input them on a database, and I hand them over to him. He had decisions made on those 20 in like a couple of hours. I mean, literally, sometimes he'll have nothing to do all afternoon because he'd make decisions so quickly in the morning. And then he used to criticise the other decision makers for taking all day. Can you believe that?
I can't. It actually makes me feel slightly sick knowing.
I know. It was just I just found it
Jesus
shocking.
Yeah, you've got to laugh, haven't you? Because it's disgusting.
It was just him as one individual. It's interesting. We also had a guy there. I know we're kind of drifting off, but we can come back to other things. But I think it's important.
Yeah.
There's a guy there in the job centre in the social fund who was also, I think he was also a magistrate. He's like a part-time sort of magistrate. He'd get a call to do some magistrate's work, like out of the blue, and he'd go off. He'd be away like for 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon because he had some magistrate business to deal with. I used to find that interesting.
I've never heard of anything like that before, ever.
We had a couple. I think we had a couple of people. We had a couple of football referees. We also had a guy who was he was a Navy Reserve diver, and these people would suddenly just vanish now and again, and people would just be expected to fill in. I think there's quite a lot of that goes on. That there's certain people are put into those sort of places, and I've met certain people who've mentioned that they were ex-lawyers, and I've got a feeling that for some reason they were not able to practice law for certain problems that never came to light, but they were just sort of moved sideways into a nice gentle job.
Yeah.
So you would have a diver, a Navy diver, that would be working as an AO or an AA, and they would just disappear for the afternoon because they got called on a job.
Oh, he could disappear for a couple of weeks at a time. He would be called out. I don't know exactly what it was, but he just generally said that he just enjoyed it, and being a reserve, he said, I can go out and, the MOD is paying for all my enjoyment, but I think he had to do specific tasks, which obviously he didn't go into too much, and I wouldn't want to expand on. I mean, even with what Neo says, there were a lot of very, very interesting characters in there.
Yes.
You would say about, I know of 2 people, you say about someone who sits there and the work just seems to disappear. You blink and suddenly the in tray's empty and the out tray's full. Now, I have met 2 people who've done that. One who was absolutely awesome, and I was fortunate enough to get some mentoring off them and learned a great deal from them. And they really did know their stuff from basically having spent 20 years doing the same thing. And then I happened to meet another person who was then assigned to help out a couple of our new people who had some problems. And they came in and actually blitzed their work. But a month later, all the work started coming back round again. And it took about 6 months for me to work out that basically the rate he cleared his work depended on how far away he was sat to one of the paper waste sacks where they put all the incineration confidential waste. And he was basically just going through, finding the fastest way to deal with something, getting rid of it, and a month later he'd have moved on, and someone else was getting all the problems back to actually have to deal with it in that way. And I think I saw both sides of the coin. You would see, some people who were so good, they could actually sit round and read the paper for a couple of hours, but other people who were definitely taking shortcuts and trying to find the easiest route through just to keep their life happy.
Yeah.
Just
Anything else?
I don't know how I'm amazed by anything anymore. I just can't imagine going through 20 community care grants in 2 hours, knowing the stuff that people, how skint you have to be, how, on your arse you have to be to apply for a community care grant, and to read some of those stories and just make a decision like that. You're talking about people's lives, just incredible.
Yeah, it was all divided up alphabetically as well. So you'd have 4 decision makers, let's say, for example, and they'd all get a split of the alphabet, and so you can imagine the amount of forms that we were. I remember, God Almighty. I remember having to input on the database system like shopping lists, literally hundreds of items. It could take me just a couple of hours to input it on the system, and every item had to go on because of legal reasons, I think.
What, the form? You had to copy the form out?
Well, it wasn't just... See, the form would just be like... It'd just be like a couple of pages, like double-sided, just sort of like, for space for, say, 5 items one side, 5 items the next. But people would fill out shopping lists. They would take a whole A4 piece of paper and write lists of what they needed.
Yeah.
And all that had to be input on the system. And it would take me a few hours to put one form on. And then it all had to add up.
Oh, they're all individual as well. So if you're, for a community care grant, if you're asking for, say bedding, you have to say how big the bed is, whether it's a double duvet, that you have to list everything individually. So instead of just saying, I want some bedding and putting a price down, they actually work from the Argos catalogue.
Yeah, they did. It was definitely, there's some breakdown. Duvet cover, that sort of thing, mattress, blah. But
So it's
people
a massive list.
People would make huge lists, like they want kitchen, not kitchen, but like bedroom fixtures, and they'd list them all, and they all had to, you had to input that in, and it would take, let's say, me a couple of hours to do. Not every day. You get 1 or 2 a week, you say, but they would take a long time. And decision makers, they wouldn't take 2 hours to decide on it. It would take me 2 hours to input it, but for them it wouldn't take them, I don't know, it didn't take them long.
To make a decision on someone's life.
Well, make a decision on something that's on a list, because I think they just, they just obviously, it's like you said with the decision maker's guide. I think I remember once seeing something like that on on top of the filing cabinets, just sitting there. And I think they may have had one which they shared amongst each other. I used to see them sometimes flicking through a book, maybe double checking to see where, just as memory, to see if they needed double checked, because they couldn't remember. But I remember being at a flipping huge book. It was huge. So, but I didn't see them. I didn't often see them reading this thing that often, that many times. Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah, community care grants will go next year anyway, so it's...
What's replacing them?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Social funds being outsourced to local authority. So each local authority will have to be responsible for what is now the social fund, and they've all said already that they're not going, they've all said they are not going to, they have no plans to have the equivalent of a community care grant, so no sort of cash grant will be available as it is at the moment. It will all be loans, or it will be It'll be local authority based. It'll either go to social care and health. It depends what how your local authority is split up. But that's probably where it will end up.
So where did local authority get their budget from? Just government, as always.
Yeah.
So local authority. So surely the government has stated in some way to them, we're not going to give you a budget for CCGs anymore.
Well, I think the way it's going to go is they're going to be set. They'll have a budget for, everything, and that's the way they'll have to deal with it how they want. I think that's
so basically they'll have a massive cut. They'll have a cutback of a budget, and they're basically saying, well, we've already got an idea of the budget we're going to get, and we can't fit CCGs into it.
Yeah,
right. Pretty much. Yeah. So all it's going to be is crisis loans, because the government basically is not interested in giving money away to anyone anymore. They want it all back. Yeah. Yeah. So just crisis loans. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's nice, isn't it? How nice. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with crisis loans as well, it will be if people need something urgently, they'll try and pay them, with the vouchers, or have some kind of arrangement with a shop, or pay you with the electrical goods. They don't want to give you cash.
Yes, right. There's no gyros left. You're no longer going to pay people in gyros. That's gone come April. Well, it's already April, isn't it? Christ.
A gyro's definitely all going then.
Well, according to the woman that I spoke to, yeah, April. It is April now, and according to her, they no longer exist. Even though the guy, like I said before, even though when I phoned up the guy did say ask where my JSA payment was, he said, "Well, you can have a gyro." So it's like, I don't think the left hand knows what the right hand's doing. I think it's been like that for a long time.
I think you're right there.
Yeah, I think that's how they want it as well.
Yeah, it's confusion. It's just it's confusion.
If they're confused, think how confused we are. Jesus.
Well, exactly. That's the way they like it, isn't it?
Can we talk about ATOS? This has been such a... Wherever I go, whatever I do, ATOS seems to hunt me down in some way, shape or form. It's, it's a problem it's an issue for everyone, for somebody everywhere. If I switch on the TV, it was on the BBC News this morning. Did anyone catch that?
Don't watch BBC.
Oh, I do sometimes. I watch the news occasionally. Most days I'll try and catch what's going on. But they had the money box guy. What's his name? Paul Lewis. Is that his name? Something like that. But talking about, April's come. 30th of April is the end of the time limit for the work capability assessment, the contribution-based employment support allowance. So after a year, you'll be kicked off it and expected to find work. And the guy on Moneybox this morning was talking about the impact it's having, particularly on couples with a partner working. Some of them will, lose the whole of their ESA payment, which is 90 odd quid a week, which is a mega loss if one of you is, ill. And that's a mega loss in anyone's budget, but shocking. And we're finding out more and more stuff about ATOS, how they operate, and people's experiences of them. I know both of you have had personal experiences, so I'd like to talk to you both about those separately. But I want just to sort of catch up. I know we were talking about an email earlier, and that was an email from somebody about ATOS and surgery. And I know that you had a couple of things that you wanted to input on that, Nick, that you'd heard back from the forum.
Yeah, this is just a couple of things that have been picking up. There's been what's called the Harrington report that still isn't totally public, but basically has slated the medical assessment procedure. There's been a lot of grief of members of the public trying to go in for medicals and trying to go in and take medicals and getting kicked out and all sorts of things. And the upshot of this is that there was a very long and very boring parliamentary committee that I didn't sit through. I managed to find a summary of it. And some senior Tory has stood up and said, we're going to allow recording. And now ATOS actually has to on request record these medicals. They have, similar to the way the police have the double tape machines, apparently they have a double CD machine. So if anyone is due to have a medical, or like myself is sitting waiting for a letter to have a medical, you are absolutely entitled to ask for this recording. Chances are they may run away and think about things, and they might have to put your appointment back for a week or two, because I don't think they've got all these machines ready. But you have that right, and I would say that everyone should exercise that.
Right, no, just wanted to ask, do you have to ask for that, for them to record this in advance? You have to ask for permission in advance?
If you request it of them, they cannot refuse, but you do have to make the request.
Before the assessment?
I think when they first get in contact, and I'm not sure how they do it. I know previously I've had letters. I think normally you get a letter which says you must call us within a week to set up the appointment, and I think during that process you say, I will require you to record. The other option I've looked at, which I think is looking in a different direction, is I've managed to track down, I lost it when my computer crashed about a month ago. I had a very, very interesting list which outlined all the facilities at every single medical centre right through the country. And a good half of these centres do not comply with disabled access laws. So if anyone is concerned about their medical, we can double check which medical centre they're going to be attending. And, it is going to be a hit and miss thing. But if they are not fully disability accessible, I think you have, either you can make a good case not to actually attend and have a home visit, or if they really force you to visit, there's a lot of things you can actually use in terms of setting up for an appeal, because it seems to me that the medical assessment has almost become a pointless exercise, in that you go through it, and as most people are turned down, I think we almost have to start concentrating on how do we actually prepare the appeal case going into that medical, so that we've got a strong case to go forward on.
Brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. We're just going back to the recording. Is the assessment recorded anyway?
Not to my knowledge. I
So
don't know that they're doing it anyway.
So if you don't ask first, it's not going to be recorded, is basically what I'm trying to get to.
Well, I don't think. I mean, if they were going to record it initially, I think they would have to tell you. If they were recording, when you even, say you try in the job centre, they always say thing on the phone says this conversation will be recorded for training purposes. I mean, if ATOS are recording conversations without even telling, you or whoever's having the assessment, that's a big no-no. That's a bad thing to do.
So we just need to remind everybody to request the recording of their assessment.
Maybe you should ask, will this be recorded?
Yeah.
That's what they say.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
So
think
in any way.
I think the main point in the past, they've certainly not wanted members of the public going in recording. And I think, to be quite honest, I don't think most of these medical people want things recorded, because it would show things in a far worse light. Because I know I've been seeing comments of where people have had someone accompany them taking notes. They get even funny with that. And where people are saying, well, I'm taking contemporaneous notes, which should have some sort of bearing. They are going into great lengths to say, well, we're happy for you to take notes, but we will not accept that they are legally valid and they're not an accurate record should you be going through an appeal process. So they're already trying to find ways out on that.
Well, they lie. I mean, I've had more than one person that's been to an assessment and then had the doctor's report, with them that they've shown me, and they've said, I didn't say that. I didn't do that. And, the health professional has written, blah, blah, blah. He could sit down comfortably. He could walk in okay. He looked well and tanned. All this stuff that's blatantly not true, but it's written in black and white.
I think the other thing I've seen too, and I wasn't particularly aware of this, I'd had my suspicions, and I've seen other people saying this, is that when you walk in for that assessment, they have CCTV cameras at the door, they have an intercom placed at a lowish height for wheelchairs, they're watching you. They're not recording, but they're watching. If you can bend down to talk to that intercom, they're noting that down. The receptionist that you go and see is not a doctor, but they are watching what you're doing in the waiting room. If someone claims they have an incontinence problem, but doesn't ask for a key to a toilet, that is noted and held against them even before the medical's begun.
So everything, your appearance matters, your manner, how you walk in, you're being judged before you've even discussed your disability or your illness.
And this is another thing, is that they're not judging you by your disability, because if I can get this right, they can't, because it would be considered discrimination. That's why they're judging you solely on whether or not
your capability.
Your capability to work. You see, they've just flipped it over. You see, they can see that a person has a problem. Let's say if you're, in some cases they can't, but let's say they have cancer, unless in some cases they have, in physical cases they can see that there's a serious issue, but they're not being judged on that issue. They're being judged, well, maybe you can do a job, doing this but the thing is that it's kind of like, well, it's kind of like, how do I put my head onto this? How do I get my head around this when I say this? It's almost as if they're just saying, "Oh well, you can kind of do a job, but it's not like a real job. It's not like a full-time job or even a part-time job. It's like, you know what I'm trying to say? It's kind of, how do I get my But it's kind of like it's kind of like, well, just because you can walk a couple of meters, well, that's okay because you're capable of doing that. So, it doesn't really make any sense. It really is just. It certainly doesn't compute with me. They're not being. It's all. How do I say it? All factors are not taken into account. I really don't see how that's being done. You're not being treated like an individual. I really don't see that happening. I certainly didn't feel like it. I mean, I've got my appeal process papers in front of me. When I actually made the, I sent back the form for appeal, and they've given me the reasons, to why they still agree with the original decision. So,
do you guys want to have a break? Do you want to carry on? What do you want to do? I don't know how long we've been going for.
I could murder a fag and a coffee, actually.
Yeah, do you guys...
cut of a tune. Put a tune on, Jack.
Yeah, go. You guys, go on then.